Hello everybody, Disney Chris here, and it's been 2 weeks since my last update of the Disneyland Magical Audio Tour, and I have a lot to let you guys know about. I've got a lot done in the past 2 weeks, and it's time to fill you all in on the changes that I've made. Basically, I've worked on 2 chapters. Disneyland After Dark and Disneyland Bandstand. Now, Disneyland After Dark I had previously completed, but following the additions that I learned about of the different musicians that performed at various grad nights throughout the years, I needed to update some of the tracks on my After Dark chapter, as well as the Disneyland Bandstand chapter. So I had some things I needed to update, change, revise, add to, however you want to put it. But the good news is I'm once again done with Disneyland After Dark. Everything that I needed to update, I have completed. So let me tell you what those changes are to this chapter. Basically everything up to track number 31 is the same as it was. Now, potpourri is basically what they at one time were calling the live dance band performances that occurred at the Tomorrowland Terrace when it first opened. So I actually updated this so that some of the artists that I had included in the potpourri, I moved to my new the Tomorrowland Stage on Stage USA, because I really felt that some of the groups that I had included in potpourri were more appropriately represented at the Tomorrowland Stage on Stage USA, because they weren't necessarily dance bands, they were more pop star performances. And I don't know for sure which bands played at Tomorrowland Terrace and which bands played at the Tomorrowland Stage, so I had to do a little bit of sort of guessing based on what type of music it was. So I shortened the potpourri track quite a bit. I took out quite a bit of music from this track, and I added all that I took out from potpourri to my new version of the Tomorrowland Stage on Stage USA, which is from 1967-ish to about 1970-71-ish. Of all the live performers who performed at the Tomorrowland Stage. And the potpourri covers this basic same time period, but it's more obscure music and it's more kind of dance band, garage band type music, which I feel would more likely have occurred at the Tomorrowland Terrace, because that was primarily a dance location, where the Tomorrowland Stage is more of a, you know, a concert type experience, a sit down and watch a performance type experience. So the Tomorrowland Stage on Stage USA is pretty much, you know, a brand new track. It does incorporate some of the music that was in my old Great American Music Machine track, but in this case it's everything from the mid-60s to the very early 70s. And I also created an interesting, if you want to listen to it, a little introduction type fanfare with a timpani drum, and it's kind of interesting. Now, originally my intention was going to be that on my bandstand chapter I was going to split the Tomorrowland Stage into 3 tracks, but keep everything as one track on the After Dark. But I decided it would be way too long, so I decided to also do the Great American Music Machine and the Great Rock Circus on the After Dark chapter. So basically these 3 tracks, Tomorrowland Stage, Great American Music Machine and the Great Rock Circus are the same track on both this chapter and the Bandstand chapter. There is one exception I'll tell you in just a second, but these three tracks are basically repeated on both chapters, as well as the potpourri. That's also included. I think there's only one. I'm gonna fix. I have a little typo here. I think there's only one R in this. I'll look into that and make the correction. Doesn't look right with two R's. Anyway, I'll fix that when I'm done recording. The Tomorrowland Stage and potpourri. Well, Tomorrowland Stage and the Great Rock Circus are identical to Onstage USA and Great Rock Circus are identical to the versions that are on the Bandstand chapter, which I'm going to show you in a minute as well. The Great American Music Machine is almost identical, but I added one extra song to this mix, and I'll explain why I did that and what song it was when I show you the Bandstand chapter, because I kind of have to show you that. The potpourri also includes one extra song, and I'll explain that again when I show you the Bandstand chapter, because it kind of, the reason it has an extra song kind of is something, has to do with something that's on the Bandstand chapter. So both of these are nearly identical, but each has one extra song, and the other two, Great Rock Circus and Onstage USA, are 100% identical to the versions. And just to refresh you of what each of these are, the potpourri is the dance bands that performed at the Tomorrowland Terrace from its early years, the 60s through the early 70s, like the first 5 years of this venue. Onstage USA is the new Tomorrowland Stage that opened in '67, and it's basically the first few years that this venue was open, when they were having big name entertainers perform evening concerts at the stage. Great American Music Machine is a continuation of that, which ran from the early 70s up until about 73, 74, and the Great Rock Circus is the final conclusion of this Tomorrowland Stage, big name entertainers, and this goes from about 73, 74 up to 76, 77. The venue actually closed in 76 when they started construction of the new Space Stage, which became part of the Space Mountain Complex, which opened in 77. So that's why this kind of ends at 76, because the theater closed and it became something else. So that is part of what I updated and changed for this chapter. Moving a little bit further down, I came across a lot more of the disco groups that performed in the later 70s at what I mentioned before, the Space Stage, which was part of the new Space Mountain Complex. Here's a picture of what the Space Stage was. Basically where Captain EO was located, and when Captain EO opened, they added a roof to the theater. It used to be an outdoor theater, but it's basically the same theater. It's in the exact same place. But anyway, before I had this long, like 2-hour mix of all of the groups at that time, that when I first made this, that I knew about, that had performed at Disneyland during that period. Well, when I found out about all the new Grad Night groups that had performed, I ended up having about a 3.5 hour, nearly 4 hour mix of disco groups. So I decided to split it up into two groups, two mixes, two tracks. So what I did is The version on my After Dark page is basically a best of, and it only runs an hour and 20 minutes, and it's pretty much the most well-known, most famous, recognizable songs from this 4-hour chunk of music. And so this only runs an hour and 20 minutes. It's basically pretty much every song you'll hear in this mix is a song you've likely heard before, performed by a well-known artist. So that's the version I'm using for my After Dark page. And I will explain the other versions when I get to start talking about the Bandstand chapter. So I made one other change to this chapter, and that's track 58, Disneyland Grad Night. This track was less extensive before now, because of all the new entertainers and whatnot that I found out about that performed at Disneyland's Grad Nights in the 80s. I decided to update this. So this is basically a best of as well. This is taking stuff from all the Grad Night tracks that I have represented on my Bandstand chapter, and I just kind of picked and choose which were the best ones. I basically have 3 different mixes on the Bandstand chapter, and out of the 3 mixes I picked the best songs, and I created this best of version for the After Dark chapter. That's what this is here, and I just updated that, and following the update to this chapter is once again completed for now, until something else happens. I mean, they have a new Pixar-themed fireworks show, which, if I am able to obtain the audio for it, that needs to be added. And they also recently had an After Dark Star Wars event, which included a special Star Wars fireworks show, and had some special music, background music during the event and whatnot. They had a parade with Star Wars music. That would probably need to be added too. So, I mean, these chapters are never ever going to be completed because Disney keeps adding more stuff as time goes by. So, I mean, there's 4 tracks there that need to be added, and I'm going to hold off on adding anything new because I need to move on to other things for now, and I'll wait till there's a lot more to add, and I'll wait till I have more of the audio for it before I get involved in all that. So basically, this is updated up till about February 2018. As of February 2018, this is everything. At least everything I have. So, Chapter 20, Disneyland After Dark, is again fully updated. I should say fully updated instead of completed. That's probably a better way to phrase it. Now let's get into the Bandstand chapter. So all this is remained unchanged, and until we get down to this track. Again, this is the Potpourri. Again, I'm not sure if it has 2 R's. I'm gonna ask somebody else if they think that it should have 2 R's or 1 R. I'm not sure how you spell potpourri. However potpourri is spelled is how this should be spelled. Anyway, there is the difference between this chapter and After Dark is I kind of have more extensive coverage and full mixes of individual groups, whereas on the After Dark chapter I kind of make best of compilations. Instead of having everything separated, I kind of combine things and do sort of best of variations of what's on this chapter, at least when it comes to live performances, because the other chapter has things other than live, like fireworks shows, parades, and things that this chapter doesn't have. I hope this is all making sense. It makes sense in my brain, but I don't know if that means it makes sense to you. Anyway, this track, like I mentioned, is almost exactly the same. However, there are there is one song performed by the Sound Castle, which I included in the version that is on the After Dark chapter, because I wanted to represent this group as part of this melody, because they don't have a separate individual track representing them on the other chapter. So that's the reason why I included them. So this is also new to this chapter, these two tracks. Basically, I decided to also include these two tracks on this chapter as a little Fantasyland Theater block, because originally I only had this on the After Dark chapter. I decided I'd also include it here. So these are identical to the versions on the After Dark chapter, but I just decided to also include them on this chapter. Alright, now this is my new and fully completed Tomorrowland Stage section. Again, On Stage USA is identical to what's on the other chapter. Kids of the Kingdom is identical. And the Great Rock Circus is identical. Now, the Great Rock Circus, the Great American Music Machine, and On Stage USA each have a fun little intro that I created. It's kind of like a fanfare to the concert events. So listen to the beginnings of these three and you'll hear a fun little tag that I added at the beginning of each of these, just for fun. It's not authentic audio, it's just audio that I felt kind of set the mood for what each of these concert events were. And I have sort of a timpani at the beginning of each one, like a drum roll, where I could imagine some sort of an announcement could be made. Like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to On Stage USA. Tonight, presenting the Osmond Brothers, or whatever, you know, just as an example. So that's why I have a little timpani at the beginning of each, because it's kind of like where I would imagine some sort of an announcement could be made. I'm just being creative and thinking outside of the box with these things. Anyway, Rock and Roll Reunion was a one-time event where they had several artists from the, the 50s era of rock and roll come and perform at the park. And this was in the early 70s when 50s nostalgia was starting to kick in. So it included Chuck Berry and not Ricky Nelson, Chuck Berry, Frankie Avalon, and a few others. And because I don't have the Rock and Roll Reunion represented on my After Dark chapter, I took one song from this, which is the Chuck Berry song, Johnny Be Good, and I included it in the version of the Great American Music Machine that is on the After Dark chapter. That is the one additional song that's on that version that isn't on this version, because on this page you hear that song on this track. So I hope all this is making sense. It sounds a little confusing as I say it out loud, but there's a method to my madness. More Legends of Country in Disneyland. I made several, I think 4 additions, maybe 3 additions to this mix, and I just updated it with 3 additional songs. Otherwise it's the same, it's just a little more added to it. Some additional artists that I learned about that I didn't know about when I posted this the first time. Moving down to this section here. This is where I split up the disco stuff into two tracks. As you can see, one of them is an hour and 50 minutes and the other is an hour and 45 minutes. So if I combine these two, it would be, almost 4 hours long. So that's why I decided to split them up. And the logic I used to split this up is the Space Age Disco Concert is headline performers, well-known like Casey and the Sunshine Band, Kool and the Gang, well-known famous performers, whereas the Disneyland Disco Dance Party is lesser known and it's more dance music. It's less songs and more kind of disco dancing type stuff. And they actually did have dances, disco with a DJ at Disneyland. Sometimes they were at the space stage, sometimes they were actually inside the Golden Horseshoe, believe it or not. And they had local radio DJs come and spin records, and they would have disco parties. They even had a couple after hours. Sorry, that's my phone. They even had a couple after hours disco dance parties where they closed down the park, kind of like how they do what did like the Grad Nights. They would do a disco night where you paid a separate admission, and then they had live disco bands throughout the park, and then inside the Golden Horseshoe they would have an ongoing disco dance party with a DJ spinning albums. So that's kind of what this represents. So that's the logic I used to split these two up. And on my After Dark page, I took mostly stuff from the concert track, but a couple things from the dance party, and did kind of a best of using the best songs from both. So now this is split up, and I have completed the update to these, so that's all set. So moving further down, of course this whole section has been coming soon for quite a while, and it is something on my list that I'm going to get to very soon. Big bands in Disneyland, but this is nothing new. This has been like this for a while. Same with this more Legends of Jazz in Disneyland. The one thing that is different now is this totally 80s After Dark section. And there are several new tracks coming and updates to existing tracks. So I need to kind of explain all that to you. So Videopolis, this track is a theme song written for Videopolis, plus one other song by the same artist, and it was actually a song that appeared on the Totally mini album from 1986 called Video Active, and they have kind of the same sound, and it's also about videos, so I decided to create a mix of the two songs. So that's what this is. It's kind of an intro to Videopolis. Videopolis House Band, Polo. This is a band that played at Videopolis often. They were sort of an in-house band. They were a local Anaheim group called Polo. And I obtained an album by this group, a short album, like 2 songs on each side of the album. And it's about 18 minutes long, and I'm going to be including that. So I'm going to have a new group represented here that I didn't have before. Just need to do some cleanup on it, because it is from an old LP, so it needs some love and care before I can post it. Okay, so this Live on Stage All-Star Performances is basically all of the different television specials from the 80s, which includes the Disneyland 30th Anniversary from 1985. Then there was a special called Summer Vacation or something like that from 86. And then there was the Captain EO Grand Opening, which had some more live performances. So I didn't use the live versions from these specials. I found studio versions of all the same performances done by the same performers and created this mix based on that. Some of these performers may have also performed at Grad Night, but I kept it as a separate thing based on the performances that took place during these television specials. They were done live in the park. They were filmed for TV and then shown on TV. So it's okay to call it Live on Stage, even though it was on a television show that wasn't live. And then we have Grad Night split into two, the 80s split into 2 sections. One goes to 84, the other goes from 85 to 89. These are being extended. I've already finished the extension of the first half. 1980 to 84 I finished 2 days ago. That one's done and posted. This has been updated already. I'm currently working on the second half. And that may be done by the end of today. So look for that today or tomorrow. That should be updated. This is brand new. I just added this yesterday. It's a little promotional piece for the Disneyland Grad Night. It's about 4 minutes long. It's just kind of like advertising what Grad Night is. I decided to include this on this chapter. Originally I wasn't going to. I actually have this same piece as the introduction to the Grad Night mix on my After Dark chapter, but I decided to separate it and include it as a separate track also on this chapter. It's kind of a lead-in to the 3 Grad Night mixes that I'm going to be having. Grad Night Party is the 90s Grad Night Party. This is a brand new track. I have it all set up. I just need to edit it. It should be after I finish the part 2 of the Grad Night Party, which I'm working on today. That's the next thing I'm going to work on, so that should be posted within a couple days as well. Moving further down the page. This section is done, and it has been done for a while, the swing bands in Disneyland. Tomorrowland Terrace, I have mentioned all this before, but I'll mention it again. I came across a couple new groups I didn't know about before. The Aquabats are going to be added. Allie and AJ are going to be added. All these groups are done. And then I have a new one that I recently added, which I've already mentioned, but I will mention it again. Scott Bruce, who is an Elvis impersonator, if you're interested in that. And then I have 2 groups that have been on here for a while, but I just haven't finished editing yet, the Bolts and Thomasina. I also finished the Summer 2017 Tomorrowland Terrace, which is a bunch of groups that performed last summer that were new to the venue. And I also decided to move this Dueling DJs Tomorrowland Terrace, which is like a, dance thing with a DJ at the Tomorrowland Terrace, which they do on Grad Night, New Year's Eve, special after hours events. I had that only on the After Dark chapter. I decided to also include it on the Bandstand chapter, and it's exactly the same as the version on the After Dark chapter. So that is where I'm at as of today. Let me show you one other thing if you're interested. This is my working folder here. This includes all the tracks that I just mentioned that need to be completed. As you can see, here's all the bands, the big bands in Disneyland stuff, is all this stuff here. It's already set up and ready to be edited. I just have to do the final cleanup on it. Here is the Polo House Band. Here's the Grad Night Party, Part 2, 85, the 90s, and here's the 4 groups I mentioned for Tomorrowland Terrace: Aquabats, Allie, the AJ, the Bolts, and Thomasina. These are all set up and ready for final editing. It's just the final editing can be a time-consuming process. So hopefully within maybe a month, 2 months I'm guessing at most, I'll finally have my Bandstand chapter done and I can move on to something else. I keep getting sidetracked and keep getting additional things added to the list, the to-do list, because I keep coming across more information. Now here is my listing of the tracks I'm using for all these different mixes. I'm going to be sending a copy of all these lists to Melanie, who does my show notes, as you may know, and she will include all of these lists in the show notes, which will be on my website on the video editor blog page of my website. I also put a copy of the video on my site as well, so you can watch the video there too, And then a few days after I post the video, Melanie will send me the show notes, and I will include those as well under the video. So this is everything I've done, and if you watched my last video, you saw a lot of yellow on this list. Well, everything that was yellow has been unyellowed because it's done. So there's a lot less yellow, as you can see. I've been busy. In fact, there's only 2 mixes that are still have yellow, and that's 80s Grad Night Party and the 90s Grad Night Party. Now, the 90s Grad Night Party is brand new. Every song is new to the site, so everything is yellow. But the other tracks, most of it is from the, the previous version, and just the stuff in yellow is new. I already started the 80s Grad Night Party Part 2 because, as you can see, this track is not yellow because, even though it's new, because I've already edited it. So I will include the lists of all these tracks in the show notes. I'm going to send this to Melanie so she has a copy that she can use, and look for it there in a couple days after this video has been posted on YouTube. So I hope everybody is having a wonderful spring. Happy Mother's Day, and I will talk to you all in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.